We are conducting a candid one-on-one interview with outgoing Congressman Scott Rigell. This is unrehearsed. He does not know what the questions are, and he is going to be very candid in his answers, as I know he will be. So we will begin the interview now. And Congressman Rigell, why are you leaving when all these big things are going on in Washington for Republicans?
Right.
You control the House, you control the Senate, you have the Republican president.
Well, I think we need to go back to why did I run in the first place? I decided to run for office and indeed ran full-time for 17 months to serve because at the time our Democratic friends had control of the House of Representatives, the Senate, and the White House. So all three levers of control they had, and as I look at it, the pedal was all the way down on spending. And as a fiscal conservative and as a businessman, my instincts and the facts led me to conclude that our nation is on a fiscal trajectory that puts every American at risk, regardless of political party or where one lives and what age one is.
Is it better now?
Well, no, and we're still on this very difficult and dangerous path. That was my principle.
Republicans in control.
Both parties have contributed to this, Andy, and I made that point very, very clear. The adherence to the Americans for Tax Reform pledge by Republicans, which doesn't allow for even a $1 increase in taxes. And I'm not a high tax advocate, but when we have nothing at the bargaining table to negotiate with, when we're trying to get our Democratic friends to help us reduce spending, which is the true driver of our debt, and our fiscal situation, well, we're locked in. Both sides are locked in, and there will be a day of reckoning with our fiscal situation, and this greatly concerns me.
You were not for Donald Trump.
No, I wasn't.
I don't think you're for him now.
Well,
what are your concerns about his presidency?
Let's be clear. Whoever our president is, whether it's President Obama, or President-elect, and then eventually, of course, President Trump. I want our president to be successful, and to the extent that they're advancing things that keep the American people safe, when they're advocates for a strong national defense, if they make any type of effort to put us on a better fiscal trajectory, then I want them to be successful. So I'm not in opposition to President Trump as a president anymore because he won the election.
Many of your colleagues that you're leaving behind in Washington are very concerned about Rex Tillerson being named as Secretary of State.
I think it's a deeply flawed decision. I don't see anything in his background that really qualifies him for this position other than the fact that he's extensively traveled, but there's no experience whatsoever that I think aligns with the demands and the duties of a Secretary of State. And I think that there'll always be a cloud over him about is he the chief salesman of the United States? Now look, we need a robust, strong economy, and we're in a global economy, but I don't think a former or current chairman or chief executive officer of ExxonMobil is the right individual to be our Secretary of State.
People are concerned about his relationship with Putin and Russia. And
they should be.
And Russia having a play in our election. What are your concerns about that and his relation to Putin?
I think Trump, well, let's go back to Trump for just a moment. I think Trump's dismissal or casual dismissal of the sum of all things that we're learning from our intelligence community, 17 different agencies have come to the conclusion, and in my view, looking at all the evidence, that it is clear that Russia, to some degree, influenced our election. Now, it's difficult, even having access to certain classified information, for a member to know to the extent that they were able to actually move votes. But I want President Trump to not be concerned about the legitimacy of his election. I think it would actually heighten his legitimacy if he would lead in this and advance the cause of determining exactly what happened.
Do you think Donald Trump, and he won, do you think he gets it? Do you think he gets the magnitude of what he is about to step into?
Well, I guess some indication of that comes from the night that he actually did win. And I think he was stunned by it. became quiet, which is unusual for him, I suppose. But I think the magnitude of the job, just in interviews with presidents and former presidents, I think it's something that just continues to build. The magnitude of the job, the range of challenges facing any president of the United States are
What are your
complex.
concerns about military, the future of military in Hampton Roads, the dangers that we need to be aware of?
Well, it all goes back to our overall fiscal situation. 20 trillion plus or minus or so in debt. We're headed toward a period now. Look what President-elect Trump has said: reduce taxes, massive investments in the defense and infrastructure. And he made it a point that he was the Republican candidate that was not going to do anything to Medicare, Medicaid, and Social Security. Now, if you just take those policies, add them all up, that is going to accentuate, make far worse our overall fiscal trajectory. And as a Republican, I just can't get my mind around the fact that other Republicans aren't raising the alarm over this. A few are in the House of Representatives, but this affects every American. Now let's go back to how it impacts the United States military. You say, well, he's going to invest in an investment in raising what we're spending on defense. At some point, you cannot continue to borrow, and there's going to be compression on the discretionary side of the budget. That's the 1/3 of our federal budget that's called discretionary. The principal line item in there is defense. But if the leaders of Hampton Roads and just everyday hardworking folks across our region think that there's a one-time solution to sequestration that's going to make the pressure go away on defense spending in Hampton Roads, that's not the case. I think there's going to be pressure on discretionary spending, and within that, defense for the rest of my lifetime because of the massive obligations that we've created with, and they're good programs, they just need to be reformed: Medicaid, Medicare, and Social Security.
And you don't see Trump doing that?
No, he said he's not. I'll take him at his word on that.
And so you're saying he's making all of these financial commitments, infrastructure, doing these things, and he's not willing to pull back on
That's
those?
correct. I mean, and this is how he navigated, I guess, this election victory that not many saw coming. But I guess he allayed the concerns of some who thought he might do something to Medicare or Social Security. But this is a recipe for a fiscal disaster of the highest order.
I spoke with Senator Tommy Norman, and he obviously is hoping that sequestration goes away. Do you see that? And what is the danger that we need to worry about, carriers going to Florida, et cetera?
Well, if you look back at my service in Congress, and I'm not used to bringing attention to myself, but if I don't share it, I guess it wouldn't be said. But I was the only member of Congress who actually advanced and introduced legislation that would, in a substantive way, relieve sequestration. It was called the American First Act. It got the lead editorial in the Washington Post. We didn't even call them, but they found out about it. And they ran it that Sunday this is common sense. This is leadership. This is what we need to do. And we had gathered all the bipartisan elements, both on the Democratic side and the Republican side, put them all together in a package that could actually be passed. And the problem is nobody, Andy, wants to touch anything like that because you have to go back and communicate some difficult things to the American people. But I've always said the American people can handle the truth. They're ready for people to speak to them and give them the truth. If it makes sense and the burden is shared fairly, they understand we need to tighten the belt.
What are the 3 things Hampton Roads needs to worry about during the next 4 years?
Well, the first one would be, are we going to get, to the extent that there is an investment in the military, to make sure that particularly the naval base gets the investment that it needs. The second thing would be trying to diversify our economy. this is a continuing challenge. As long as I've been in the business community and then in public service, I go to the annual State of the Region, and we'd always talk about diversifying the economy. Very difficult on that. The third thing is making sure that we get the proper medical attention and care to our veterans. There's going to be a major, I think, improvement in that with the facility that's being opened. The VA is making a major investment in that. But because of the unique nature of our district, highest concentration of men and women in uniform in the country, active duty and retired, just making sure they get medical care.
Donald Trump campaigned on veterans affairs, of doing more for veterans. Do you think veterans are better with the Donald Trump presidency? Do you see that? Or do you think it's lip service?
Well, I think he would like to do that. It all depends on leadership, who he puts in charge of the VA. And something else has to happen that was entirely absent. And this is a critique of the Obama administration. I would say the president himself. I don't recall a single instance when things really went sideways in his administration and people were truly held accountable. I mean fired. No one likes to fire someone. If you do, then there's something wrong with you. But if you look at the VA, if you look at the Edward Snowden case, on and on, there's just a lack of accountability to where key leaders who should have known, who should have proactively stopped something or led something, they were never held accountable. And the IRS, for example.
Wasn't that one of Donald Trump's strong points, though, holding people accountable, time for change, we're going to do things differently? I mean, he's basically flooded Washington with Wall Street, hasn't he?
Well, that's the way it's looking. There are parts of, if I could isolate all the character deficiencies I see in him, which is really impossible to do. I've always said there's not one character trait in him that I would want my son to emulate. Not one. But the policies, many of the policies that he wants to advance, I support. I support the construction of the wall. And if you look at my positions, they're very, people would say they're very conservative. I am a conservative.
So you're for a wall. But the hit on that was that it sent out a message of negativity.
Well, see, this is where he was so offensive to me and to so many others. In our nation, to really get something done of substance, you have to win people over. That's leadership. You're more pulling them rather than pushing them. And I think that Donald Trump has deeply divided our country. I cannot see him bringing us together. Do I hope that happens? Yes, I do, because I'm an American first. But the recklessness with which he says, oh, well, we'll just make Mexico pay for this. I mean, it's a bizarre statement. No one, even in his administration, really believes that. But people would grab onto something like that, and then they'd say, well, we're not going to make any adjustments to Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security, and Republicans are buying into that. This is,
I mean,
it's really bizarre.
During the whole introduction of that, he said they're rapists. The rapists will be coming over. They're criminals. You think that's wrong?
You know, absolutely. And by the way, civility is not weakness. Civility is not weakness. I am not saying capitulate. I'm not saying don't have a fence. I have always supported a fence. I would borrow the money to build the fence because...
Is it really necessary?
Yeah, it is. Here's why. Because the people who hit us on 9/11, if they could have killed more of us, they would. There is a relentless effort by radical Islamic extremists to take more of us down.
I mean, here locally, I mean, one of the arguments against about what you're saying is in our community alone, we have a lot of Mexican workers. They're doing work. They don't want to blow up buildings. They just want to make money. They want to do this. They want to do that.
Andy, it can look like it's directed at just Mexicans or Mexico. No, it is a porous border. For a nation to be secure, we need secure ports. We need secure airports. We need a secure northern border to the extent that we can do this. We can't eliminate all risk from our lives. We can't have a border agent at every linear foot of our border. I get that. But when there are 12-year-olds that are walking across the border, and that's happened, Al-Qaeda and their derivatives and similar inspired groups, ISIS, they'll see that as the weakest way in. And for anybody who would say, well, walls don't work or something, they've never been to Israel. I mean, walls do work, and they have a place to keep us safe.
Fences make good neighbors?
Well, yeah, it's an oversimplification, but yes.
Yeah. Okay, next issue. Do you regret encouraging Randy Forbes to run
No.
the 2nd District?
No, I feel badly because he went through so much and didn't prevail. But I have no regrets in calling him and encouraging him to run because he was second in line to be chairman of House Armed Services Committee. Whether one is a Democrat or a Republican, what's happened is our 2 U.S. senators, they were in the majority, now they're in the minority. They're working hard for Virginia, but they're in the minority. We lost Eric Cantor. We lost Frank Wolf and Jim Moran, 2 senior members of the Appropriations Committee. This is what's changed since I've come to Washington.
You think we have less clout?
There's no question. When I first went to Washington, we were like big men on campus. I mean that. I mean, we had the majority leader. We had 2 senior members of the Appropriations Committee. Randy Forbes, chairman of C-Power, Rob Whitman, chairman of Readiness on House Armed Services. And then within about 18 months, it all flipped. And it was this sucking sound of influence out the door. The Commonwealth of Virginia found itself in a very different situation. And you asked me earlier, you said, Scott, why'd you get off House Armed Services and pivot over to appropriations? Because that's where the money is allocated, okay, including defense, and we didn't have a Virginian on there.
Do you think Randy Forbes should become the next Secretary of the Navy?
Oh, absolutely. I truly don't know of anyone who is more knowledgeable, more passionate about the issue, who really understands the risks that we face, not only in the Pacific, but in the Atlantic and indeed around the world.
Do you realize, in hindsight, looking back, and you're a great, you can read the tea leaves. You're very good at that. In hindsight, if he had stayed in the 4th District, with the way the results were that we saw on election night, very close, very close. McEachin did not blow anyone out of the water, that he could have won. That he could have won that seat with his power in Chesapeake. Do you agree with that?
I don't. Now, I don't. I don't. Now, I didn't unpack every precinct, but I didn't see it as winnable for a Republican. It wasn't designed to be winnable for a Republican. Indeed, this brings us to, I think, to the causal problem here in our country really is hyper-redistricting. This has hurt our country. It's created a hyper-polarized House of Representatives. And to try to get any common sense, common ground legislation through the House that can become law is nearly impossible. And that's why in office and out of office, I'm going to be working on redistricting.
Why are you leaving Washington with Republicans so in control? I think you may have answered a little bit before, but real quick answer. Are you leaving for family reasons, or are you just tired of it?
Well, I was never a lifetime...
You're tired of the caustic atmosphere.
Well, I can't... the purpose in running was to take the gavel from Nancy Pelosi. And my first vote on the House floor was, who do you want to be Speaker? And I know my predecessor would have said Nancy Pelosi. And I said John Boehner. And that was a good feeling. But
when you came in 2010,
right? Yeah.
Okay, you came in 2010.
Yeah, took office in 11.
In 11.
Right.
Okay. 2011.
Right.
Everything's flipped.
Well, that's not the point. Look,
Republicans now in.
Let me put it this way.
Was that because of Scott Rigell?
Oh, no. I think the nation our nation is like, our republic is like a river. It meanders. I mean, look, more people voted Republicans for members of Congress, more than 3 million votes for Republican members of Congress, and yet 2 million more votes for Hillary Clinton. It's not that we're bipolar or anything as American people. It's just sometimes we'll split a ticket like that. So anyway, I sought the office so that this unchecked spending of the Democrats having the House, the Senate, the White House could be checked. And about 11 months ago, Paul Ryan had us all, and he just become Speaker, and he said, look, we got to get this right. We now have the highest majority in the House that we've had since 1928. And Andy, that was a night that it really struck me as, well, maybe, just maybe my time in my season of service, and I always saw it as a season, maybe my time is coming to a close. And I started to talk to Terry, my wife, about that. And that's where the conversation got started.
Now, what are you going to do now?
Well, first thing I'm going to do is reconnect with my family. This job is like...
have there been issues with you're not connected?
Oh,
with
gosh.
your family? Look at all the pictures.
It's very difficult to...
Back and forth.
Well, see, for the longest...
You have grandchildren.
And here's the thing, Andy. Not all districts are the same. This is one thing I learned up in Congress. Many members have no problem getting reelected. Their district is so Republican or so Democratic that if you win the primary, you're going to Congress. That wasn't the case in Virginia, too, and that was a good thing. But we were only one of a handful, about 30 districts in the nation, 435 congressional seats in the House. Only about 30 seats are really in play. Virginia's 2nd congressional district was one of them. So my point is, I was having to raise money, run, and try to be an effective member of Congress, and also, stay connected to your family. And it's like, hey, look, you pick any 3 out of 4
You're
plates.
one of the lucky ones, though, because you're so close to Washington. How about the guy who lives over in Nevada or the guy who lives in California?
I see him running out after votes, trying to catch a plane. Oh, every Virginian and those from Maryland and so on. We're all very fortunate in that respect.
We were talking about conversations you had with Tim Kaine about the election. What would you like to share with us? Whatever you want to.
Sure, I think he'd be fine with this. We meet monthly as a delegation. That is a bipartisan House and Senate. So everyone who represents Virginia, we meet for lunch, and this is unique. And I think it speaks well of our delegation. So obviously, when Senator Kaine comes in, we're going, Tim, what was that like? And he just started to walk us through.
How devastated was he, and how surprised?
Well, Tim,
surprised.
Yeah, he did walk through a progression where I think there looked to be a time when they were going to prevail. He said that lasted about an hour and a half, and then it started to pivot, and that feeling, started to come over. But
was he with Hillary on election?
He didn't say, and I didn't recall us talking about that.
How did he describe Hillary on election night?
Well, he didn't get into that, and I think I want to be careful about characterizing what Senator Kaine said.
He thought that he lost.
No. What I recall from our conversation, and we were delighted that he was sharing it with us, was just the demands of the campaign itself. How many stops in some number of days? It was like 800, I think, or something. And these are statistics, obviously, that Senator Kaine should. He's the source of this, but it was an incredible number of stops, an incredible pace that they were on, and he was just talking about just trying to grab a little bit of sleep here and there, and that was really the essence of...
Did he talk about strategy, about the campaign not going to Wisconsin after the convention?
We didn't get into that. What we started to pivot to was what we always talk about at these monthly meetings is the needs of the Commonwealth. For example, trying to get the Triton unmanned aerial system up at Wallops, So we actually pretty quickly pivoted to reality, working together as a congressional delegation to advance the interest of the Commonwealth.
I'm going to run down these 10 real quick.
Okay.
These are Scott's 10 commitments to Hampton Roads and Eastern Shore voters. This is when you were first elected in 2010 and then started serving in 2011. I'm going to run down the 10 and just real quick one-sentence answers because I want to run through them.
Sure.
Number 1, you will listen to your concerns, issues, and ideas.
I did that.
I will lead by example.
I certainly did that.
I will bring accountability to Washington, D.C.
To the best of my ability, I did that.
What was the major thing you did with that?
Well, holding my own party accountable for policies that were hurting our financial trajectory.
America's founding documents will guide my decisions.
Yeah.
I will serve every part of our community.
I did that, and I tell you that I love that part. Just worshiping in different churches, being part of just the full and beautiful fabric of Virginia too. We were very deliberate about that.
Here's a big one for you. Washington, D.C. will never be called my home.
No, I was up there, but not of there.
You said that you would serve no more than
six terms,
You're
12
only
years.
serving 3.
Yeah, 6 years. I decided 6 years was the right amount for me, because I think I got enough done, and this seat I don't think is at risk like it was when I first ran.
I will always be accessible, including by my home phone, and you put your phone. If I call this number, will I?
Yeah, it's going to ring. I won't answer it because I'll be in here.
I will never vote on a bill that I have not reviewed.
That's right.
It wasn't there one.
No, we couldn't. Now, we couldn't. At first, I said that I had read completely, and then others who were up there said, Scott, you will literally not be able to do this. But we always went over it with my staff and reviewed all the attributes of it, and oftentimes I did read them.
I will do whatever is necessary to ensure that the American people remain safe and free.
Yes, to every extent that I had that influence over that, in terms of a strong national defense, and especially in terms of like cybersecurity and things like that.
I will never forget why you sent me to Washington.
Well, I had a real strong accountability group, starting first with my wife, Terry, and then I always wanted to be accountable. I believe in accountability.
What do you see in your rearview mirror as you are leaving Washington, D.C.? What are you leaving behind?
Well, on the downside, just the ability to engage on the most critical issues that are facing our country. I'll miss that. I'll miss my staff. It's a unique situation. You become very close with your team, and I think this is true of all of the offices, because there's an intensity about public service that you really sense. We called it Team Rigell, and they're just dear friends, and I'm sure we'll be friends for life. I'll miss that, and a lot of colleagues that I've made friendships with on both sides of the aisle.
What is your greatest achievement? Short answer.
The singular one was I personally led in the House the Syria, the authorization for the use of military force, and Joe Biden, Vice President Biden, in the Situation Room said, Congressman Rigell, we know what you're doing. And it was only just a few days later, that Sunday, where the President walked out to the Rose Garden and he said, Congress is demanding to be heard on this issue, and no one saw this coming. And he said, and I agree, and we're going to do that. That was not where the administration was headed. And none of my own leadership was saying that he needed to seek and receive an authorization for the use of military force before intervening militarily in Syria. And I am not for a moment saying that I stopped a war in Syria, not for a moment. And I'm not saying that I would have objected to military action against Syria. But it is not the King's Army. Senator Kaine and I are in complete agreement on this, and we've actually worked together very closely. We have gotten away, Congress has gotten away from exercising its duty to oversee the introduction of force into an area. If the president, any president, this president or the next, authorized the use of military force or took action overnight because there was something came up, I'd be among the first to applaud that. There's not time to come to Congress. But when, for example, President Obama goes to the United Nations and talks about Libya and Gaddafi, but he doesn't come to the United States people through their representatives, we put over 100 Tomahawk missiles into the sand and into the cities of Libya. That's a war, Andy. We are at war. Was there ever a declaration of one? Was there ever a debate in Congress about that? No. I was livid about this. I've been in office 3 or 4 months. I tried to defund it. I defunded Operation Odyssey Dawn. And against leadership didn't like it. And I found myself working with, ironically, Dennis Kucinich. I said, well, if he's for that, I'm for that too.
Final words on what you want us to know about your time in Washington.
Well, what I learned is this, is that our nation is absolutely worth fighting for. And all the things that are so offensive about public service and running for office and the things that make you wince and these reasons that would compel someone, a reasonable person, to become cynical, to say, no, I don't want my son or daughter to run, or I won't run. I would say, respectfully but firmly to that person, those are precisely the reasons that you do need to wrestle with that question as to whether you should run, or someone in your life, or someone that you know should run. Because if you just leave it alone, self-governance is hard work. We need good men and women to put themselves forward on both sides of the aisle. It's a good and honorable service to your fellow neighbor and to the next generation to serve in public office.
Congressman, thank you
All
very
right.
much. Thank you.
Thank you, Andy.
Thank you. I appreciate your time and I appreciate your service. Thank you very
No,
much.
I appreciate it. Thank you for the opportunity.